Xi say they are trying to reach a deal to call the whole thing off. Our resolution is framed this way. The U.S. and China will both lose the trade war. Our first debater will be Parag Khanna.
Let's start with the ways in which China will be a relative loser. And for both China and the U.S., the further you look out in the future, I think the further this will become apparent. Some major shifts in trading patterns really predate the trade war, such as the diffusion of supply chains out of China. A lot of it has to do with the fact that Chinese wages have been rising, so multinational companies, whether American or Japanese or European, have been diverting their labor and their manufacturing work out of China into Southeast Asia for quite some time. Foxconn, for example, has done so as well. India last year got more foreign investment than China did. Southeast Asia got more foreign investment in the last 5 years. And now, of course, China's industrial policies alienating a lot of countries, suspicion of Chinese companies like Huawei as well. China is sort of being brought back to earth in that sense through this trade war. Now for the U.S., the case is even more clear-cut in terms of how it's going to lose, because most of what the U.S. exports to China can be substituted by others, whether it's semiconductors that China is going to get from Taiwan or South Korea or Japan, soybeans that it will get from Brazil and Argentina, and even now Russia is growing soybeans, airplanes, maybe China will stop buying as many from Boeing and will buy more from Airbus, so the U.S. will also be a loser from the trade war.
Thank you, Parag Khanna. Our next speaker on this resolution, the U.S. and China will both lose the trade war.
How much money do you
How
have?
do you declare, yes or no?
I'm gonna stop being contrarian now. I'm gonna go with the flow. But no, I think both countries are already losing the trade war. I do think, though, on a more optimistic note, that if we can pull back from this trade war and get some kind of a deal, there is a possibility that both sides can win. China is in a period of retrenchment from reform. There's a joke going around in China now. Who are two old guys who are going to push China into the modern era? Deng Xiaoping and Donald Trump. They want Donald Trump to push China as hard as possible to reinvigorate its economic reform program, because they know that the Chinese economy needs to move to the next stage of opening up. And I think the rest of the globe would also benefit from some kind of a deal that we could get, as long as we get some progress on these structural issues.
Thank you, Susan Thornton. On this resolution, Ian Bremer, do you declare yes or no?
I'm going to declare no. I don't think there's going to be a trade war. I feel very strongly that the Americans and Chinese, for different but overlapping reasons, are going to back down Trump because he doesn't want it to affect the American markets, and it hasn't really, except for a little scare in December, and because he wants to show that he personally can do a big deal. And the Chinese, because actually their economy's gotten a little bit more vulnerable, and Xi Jinping doesn't want this fight right now, where the U.S. and Chinese economies were very interdependent. They still are. China's becoming gradually a larger economy than the U.S., but still very far behind on a per capita basis. Yes, we're seeing growth slow in both China and the United States. In China, that's because of debt deleveraging. In the United States, that's because of the Fed and the end of the tax cuts stimulus. So if you ask me to really make a strong call here, we're both going to get hurt by this trade war. At the margins, I think I'd say yes, but overall, I think I'd say no.
Thank you, Ian Bremer. Our next speaker on the resolution, the U.S. and China will both lose the trade war. Michelle Flournoy, do you declare yes or no?
I will declare yes. Given the interconnectedness of the two economies, it's really not possible for either country to win a trade war should it continue. Restrictions on trade end up resulting in increased prices and decreased exports for both countries. I think if these tariffs were sustained into the future, there's projections that you'd see reduced U.S. exports, decreased GDP, and also elimination of substantial number of American jobs. You know, the U.S. does need to challenge China's unfair trade practices, whether it's restrictions on market access, theft of intellectual property, subsidies, extraordinary subsidies to
it's also lowering cost of living for poor Americans. Right? There's a book called Made in China, in which the author tried for 1 year live on products not made in China, and she found it extremely difficult.
That concludes our opening round on this third resolution, and I want to go, since we have 4 yeses and 1 no, and that no is Ian Bremmer, I want to go back. Are you arguing that neither the U.S. or China will lose the trade war, or that one of them won't? They both won't, or one of them?
I'm first of all arguing that they both won't. Right now, I think Trump's backing down, but if you'd gone the Bannon route, where when he was chief strategist in the White House and he said, look, we're going to come to blows with the Chinese eventually, but we're more powerful than they are now. If we wait for 5 or 10 years, it's going to get a lot harder. We've got to hit them really hard. I think if that had been the strategy and the Americans did it with the Europeans, with the Japanese, joined TPP, put together the strongest possible case, I think the Chinese would have backed down. I do think the Chinese are strategically smart about this. So ultimately, they made some mistakes. Xi Jinping, the fact that the Chinese were always saying we're not ready to be leaders, Xi Jinping came out of the box pretty hot, and he said, no, I'm going to be a leader, and we're going to be the leaders in free trade. And by the way, I'm even going to be a leader for life. So I'm going to get rid of all term limits. Now that they've seen that the Americans are a little unpredictable and willing to potentially hit them hard in ways that every single one of my co-panelists have admitted this is hurting the Chinese economy, they're not going to play. And as a consequence, we're just not going to have a trade war.
Does the other 4 of you agree that we're not going to have a trade war?
There's competition, right? I call it tug of war. We're always competing to have the largest share of the supply chain or value creation within our shores, employing our workers, generated by our companies with our IP, or that we've bought, borrowed, or stolen from others or built ourselves.
Sure.
Even if you have a resolution next week, let's be perfectly clear, it still continues, because whatever hiatus or pause or reform the Chinese may offer, it's going to be very slow to implement, and they're going to make sure that they've locked in benefits to them, but in certain sectors before they actually open those sectors. So it continues even when not in name.
Susan Thornton.
We are in some kind of a tech war, and I think that's going to go on long after this, whatever the deal is, and that will continue to have knock-on effects for both the U.S. and the Chinese economy.